Okay, we're good to go.
Yay, looks good.
All right. So thank you everyone for joining us tonight. We appreciate you taking time to join us as we talk about college pathways and some planning for post-high school, post-high school education. Oh, thank you. So real quick, we're just going to do introductions.
So I'm Diane Barry, and I work with students with last names A through HA.
And I'm Brianna Trevino, or Bree, and I work with 10th through 12th, last name HE through N.
And Maurice Montero, last names O through Z, grades 10 through 12. And then Carrie Phipps is the ninth grade counselor. She's not here tonight.
I'm Jen Marsden. I'm the College and Career Specialist, and I also coordinate the Aspire program. And Karen Baratz is our Counseling Office Manager, and she also is our Scholarship Coordinator.
All right, so tonight's goals, we are going to talk about how to utilize resources that will help you plan for your education or your child's education after high school, and then help you to understand the importance of finding a school or program that is a good fit for you and your student. Before we get started, I also would just like to let you know, if you have any questions, please feel free to either put them in the chat, or if you want to save your questions till the very end, we'll have some time to go over some questions. If you have general questions, you can pop those into the chat, and then more specific questions, we'll save those to the end, and you can talk to the counselors about those. All right, so with transitioning from high school to college, it's not always just a simple A to B. For some students, it might be really simple if they know what school they want to go to and they know that your family can afford that school. But then we also have a lot of students who their path looks like the bottom A to B. So it's a little more complex. And they might have, different schools that they're looking into, community schools. They might not have any idea of what they want to do. And then most of our students typically land somewhere in between those. So hopefully with this presentation tonight, we can get some of those questions answered for you.
Okay, so resources that parents can use as well as students. There's the Ashland High School College Handbook, which I believe Jen put in the chat room, the link. Online sources, SCORE, and others. SCORE is basically, we'll talk about that in a few slides here. Diane will get into that in a little more detail. College and Career Center in the library, which Jen runs, which is an awesome resource to use. She's very knowledgeable, has a lot of contacts. Definitely reach out. Aspire, mentors to help you, that once again Jen runs the program and has adult volunteers helping students navigate through the complexity of college application. College and Career Readiness class, which is typically first semester of your child's senior year. They'll take college, the college class, typically called CCR, and then it switches to econ, but that's designed to help navigate the complexities as well. And then ideally, college visits and Ashland High School info nights. So once again, ideally, you'll be able to visit some college campuses, get a feel. It's really important to do that, as well as the info nights and college visits that come to Ashland, either real world or virtually. So this past year has been virtually, a lot of virtual visits, but it's still available.
Okay, I'm going to tell you a little bit about SCORE. This is an online college search platform that we teamed with about 1.5 years ago. We're really excited about it. We haven't really explored it to its full potential. So I want to tell you all that in an ideal world, we would have been able to really be meeting with your students with kind of in guidance lesson format all the way from 9th, 10th, and 11th. With the goal to be kind of working with them around increased self-awareness around their strengths, their interests, how those connect with career categories and college programs and vocational schools and all that kind of thing. But at the high school, we really haven't had kind of the time kind of embedded in the schedules to do that in 10th and 11th. We're looking to kind of change that if you have younger kids and work toward that. But we are trying to get in during advisory. And we will be meeting with your juniors next week and the following week during advisory. They'll be seeing a presentation on the SCORE platform. Every one of your juniors will get an account. And what's most important about this account right away is that we're going to move them through a series of aptitude assessments and an interest inventory. And this is exciting for us because a lot of students and a lot of parents think, well, the next step is college. But it's pretty normal not to kind of know what you're focusing on or kind of how to kind of design or shape that college search. By completing this aptitude assessment, this series of aptitude assessments, there's 10 short ones, and this long interest inventory, what your child gets, will get this really extensive report that tells them a lot about who they are, not just their hardwired skills, but also what their interests are. And then it will kind of combine those, what they're good at and what they're interested in, and provide them a really comprehensive list of best fit careers. Then once they're able to look at those careers, they can actually dig down even deeper. And this is all on the same platform. And they can learn about what the working environment's like, what the job requirements are, what the educational requirements are. It's really fascinating how many jobs are offered in that field. So we've had a lot of students who are just who have actually completed this really, really enjoy it and actually even shift their focus at times. It's something that we really want you all as parents to participate in terms of having conversations with your kids about this once they get their results. So we're going to go ahead and have a SCORE information night next week, same time, same place, Zoom. We're going to give parents and guardians an overview of how SCORE works. We're starting with an aptitude assessment and an interest inventory, but SCORE is much more. SCORE is a place that students can list all sorts of things on what they're interested in a college. They can set parameters, and then they can push search, and all of a sudden a whole list of schools populates their screen. And then they can kind of refine that, they can shift that, they can say, I want to go 500 miles, no more than 500 miles away. I want to make sure it's less than 5,000 kids. I want to make sure my test scores, meet the criteria I get into. Any of these kinds of things. It's a really great platform for this. So we'll be talking a lot more about that. Your students will be introduced to it on next Wednesday. They'll do a follow-up the following Wednesday, a follow-up lesson, and we'll send home some information to you all about some good questions to ask your students to get those good conversations going. All right, that's enough. Okay.
Okay, so this next page and the whole PowerPoint in general is going to reference the college handbook, because pretty much everything you need to know, the basics of college exploration, is in the handbook. And so really try to direct students and parents towards the handbook and the presentation. So when questions come up, you maybe look there first before asking us, because usually you can find the answers on your own. Although we're happy to hear from you and explore any kind of questions or interests that you have. So On the first page of the handbook is a junior checklist, and the handbook is created every spring. And maybe we can mute people. So some of you might want to check your speaker because somebody's not muted. Oh, and I can't do the mute all because I'm sharing my screen. So maybe one of the co-hosts can check. Okay, so the first page in the handbook is a junior checklist, and some of you might be sophomores and sophomore parents, and that's great. It's never too early if you're interested to start getting this information, but the handbook's created every year and updated with juniors in mind as something to guide them through the spring of junior year and into their senior year. So there's the junior checklist and then a senior checklist. Page 3 is a really nice compilation of both print and online resources for parents and students. And on that page, we really stress that parents and students think of the college exploration, the college application process as really a time for self-reflection and growth. It really is that. I have seniors tell me every year, wow, I didn't realize how much I would learn about myself, my interests, what I want, going through this process. Because if students and parents really do their research, which you really need to do to find a pathway that's a good fit, you really can learn a lot about yourself and your goals and your strengths and what you're interested in. So look at some of those resources on page 3. Students and parents tend to just look at the name brand schools they know, what their friends know, their peers. There's a lot of books and resources on there, including SCORE, that really challenge students and parents to kind of think outside the box on that and to really look at what's going to be a good fit for the student and the family. There's also a page in there on ACT and SAT, how to register online. Things are, of course, a little different this year and have been since last spring because of COVID. We have not been a testing site for the ACT or SAT since last spring due to safety guidelines with COVID. We are going to start, at least the plan is to start offering the SAT and the ACT again starting March 13th. So the way you register for those tests is online. There are fee waivers available to our students who qualify for free and reduced lunch. And so you can see in the handbook and on the AHS website, under the College and Career Center, there's all sorts of information about this. Or if you check out the counseling department news that you should have gotten in an email today, both students and parents, there's links to how to register for the SAT and ACT and how to email Karen Baratz, our counseling office secretary, who can give fee waivers to students to register for both the ACT and the SAT. And of course, there are lots of schools, especially now with COVID, where taking these tests or submitting test scores are totally not required, are test optional or even not accepted. So even our Oregon State Universities, U of O, OSU, last spring pre-COVID, just like the California public school system, decided they were no longer going to require SAT or ACT scores for admission. So things are changing on that front, but it's always best to check with the schools that you are interested in applying to and seeing what their requirements are. Okay.
Okay, so finding a good fit school. A lot of things to consider when considering the school for your child. College search can be a little complicated, a little overwhelming, but doesn't have to be, especially if you plan ahead. I think one of the biggest things to consider is, does the school provide the course or the profession that your child wants to get into? A lot of times students get caught up in names of the school and then find out that they don't even offer the program that they want. So the biggest thing to be considering with the school is the quality of the program. Some schools offer better quality programs than others, regardless of name. Other things to consider are the size of the school, urban versus rural. Would your child be okay with sitting in an auditorium in an intro class of 300 kids, which does occur, or would they thrive more in a smaller environment? Location, once again, urban versus rural. Do they want the opportunities and the things that are offered in a bigger city, or would they be more comfortable in a smaller setting? The culture, the atmosphere of the school itself. I think if possible, it's really important to visit a campus to get that feel. There's nothing like going to campus and looking around and seeing how your child feels about the school. The cost, of course, is a huge factor. What's offered, and we'll get a little more into this later on, private versus public. There are benefits to both. So these are things to consider.
And so I also wanted to give a plug on March 10th in this series of College Pathways Information Nights. We're going to do a special night on how do you find a college that's a good fit for you, or a college pathway. So maybe mark your calendars with that, and we have a list of all of these sessions at the end if you want to take a screenshot of them. But in the College Handbook on page 9 and 10, we go into each of these sections in a little more detail, paragraphs, questions to ask yourself, or for the student to ask themselves, for parents and students to discuss. And it's always interesting for students to talk about these things hypothetically or theoretically, but sometimes when students actually get on a campus, it's a totally different feel. And it's kind of hard with COVID now to be traveling and visiting campuses. But, you know, I always encourage parents and students early on, you know, from middle school, elementary school, when they're traveling, and I know a lot of you have done this, is you go on college campuses, you check them out, you go to a museum, you go to a football game. And so our students, you know, have that experience too, traveling with speech and debate or band or sports. So our kids have gotten the feel of some campuses along the way, and hopefully our juniors and sophomores will start to be able to get back out there in the world and check out more campuses they're interested in again. So on this last part, creating your list, there's some other things to take into consideration. And one of the things that really comes into play, and I've been doing this now for about 15 years, the last 10 or 12 years at Ashland High School, is it used to be when you were helping students think about their college planning and creating their list of schools where they want to apply if their list isn't really clear. Like, I've always wanted to be a duck. I want to, you know, study something at U of O, business. It's great. I'm going there. For a lot of students, it's a little more complicated, and they're looking at a variety of schools, whether private, four-year, public universities, community colleges. Most of our students, besides like the top most competitive schools like the Ivy League, Stanford, Pomona, the super competitive schools, Northwestern, University of Chicago, most of our kids get into the schools they apply to. But what it comes down to is having financial safety schools. So what I was saying is, it used to be you'd have your reach schools and your safety schools when you're building your list. But what I saw when I first came to Ashland is kids would build lists like that, but their safety school would be OSU or U of O, but they really weren't excited about going to those schools. But the reality was they either didn't get into their top or academic reach schools, or they got into those academic reach schools, but then their families couldn't afford them. And so it's really, really sad in the spring, and it doesn't happen very much in the more work anymore, because we talk about this all the time, is when kids will get into their dream schools, but then their families really feel like they can't afford them. So I really encourage parents, as soon as it seems reasonable for their family, when kids start to get interested in college planning, to really talk about how much, and I start my senior college and career readiness classes with this, how many of you students, seniors, have had a conversation with your parents about how much they can contribute to your college education each year. That doesn't mean parents need to say, this is how much I make every year, this is how in debt I am. It's really an honest conversation of, we love you, we think it's great you want to go to college, but really we can only afford to pitch in $5,000 a year, or really nothing. Or we've been planning for this forever. We have 529, your grandparents have a 529, we've got you covered. And I tell the students, you say, great, thank you, I'm going to start applying, but I just need a little clarification. Like, when you say you have me covered, do you mean U of O have me covered, like $28,000 a year have me covered? Or do you mean like Reed have me covered, like $70,000 a year have me covered? Because that's a big difference. And I'm run into that too, where kids feel like, oh no, my parents said I'm fine, I should apply. And then, oh, what the grandparents have is 10,000 a year. That's not read, have me covered. And so I really tell this to parents, like I said, I don't want you to be the dream killers. I don't want your kids to be sad in the spring. I want kids and parents to really have a plan that's going to make sense, to do the research. On the top of the screen, they're under cost. None of the costs of college are a mystery now. Every college by law is required to have a net price calculator on their website, which will ask you a series of questions about your student, about the family's financial resources, and give you a sense of what that school will cost. So I really can't stress this strongly enough, which is why I'm blathering on about it right now. But if you want to learn more about financial aid scholarships, I'm going to talk a little bit about it tonight, just the very basics, but we're going to have a financial aid 101 and scholarship night. I think that one's in April. So if you're interested in wanting to learn more about that and what that process is going to look like next year, for those of you who are juniors who are here, because all those applications happen senior year, try to attend. And in the handbook, there is a whole section on financial aid, and there is a cost of attendance page. COA is something that you'll become familiar with if you're not already. The cost of attendance of schools, which is usually twice or 4 times what the tuition actually is. And on page 23 of the handbook, there's a standard student budgets page, which gives you the cost of attendance for every school in Oregon, from community college to private. So if you haven't been following the cost of college in the news, or this might be a little eye-opening for you to see what college is really costing now, or it might not be, because and also just take into consideration that some of the cost of attendance numbers in there are going to be variable depending on what books cost, transportation costs, those kind of things, but you have to consider all those when looking at cost of attendance. So I'm gonna pause here because I saw there was something put in the chat. So are there questions that anyone's put in the chat that we should address so far, or a question somebody has that they might want to just ask? Take a little breather here. No? Okay. Oh, this is my slide too. Somebody just put something in the chat before I go on. Does one of the counselors want to see if there's something?
Yeah, someone asked, does the handbook include info on WUI schools?
Yes, it does. And we're going to get there in about 3 slides. So thanks. Good question. So this slide is kind of a little overview of community colleges. You can see the 17 that exist in Oregon. A lot of students know about a few of them, but not all. I actually have a student this year who's applying to both Blue Mountain and Treasure Valley, which is really rare. They're up there in the eastern and the northeast and the very eastern part of the state. So we have really robust community college system. A lot of students don't realize that there are no minimum GPA requirements. So students who feel like, oh, I really didn't do well in high school, I've got a 2.0 and I'm not going to be able to go to U of O. Community colleges don't care. You can get in and you start where you are, and no one's ever going to look at your high school grades again. Community colleges, ACT and SAT are not required. Some community colleges those in lieu of placement tests. Community colleges have low costs. They also have a huge variety of career pathways that they offer that four-year universities do not. And on page 25 to 28 in the College Handbook, there is a really cool graphic, which is a little hard to read because it's shrunken down, but it has all these different certificate or 2-year career pathways, from being a veterinary tech to graphic design to alcohol and drug counselor, pathways that our students are interested in, physical therapy assistant, occupational therapy assistant, where students can come out of a community college in 2 years making more than I'll ever make in my lifetime because they've gotten this professional training. And I love doing what I do. I'm really glad I have a master's degree. But those old graphics you see where the more education you have, the more you're going to make. I mean, while that does generally hold true, it's not always true, right? And community colleges have really grown so much in the last 20 years where they're offering really robust career pathway programs. The other potential options for students at community college is to start at a community college, do their first 2 years there, take all their general ed requirements, and then transfer to a 4-year college and finish up with their major at the 4-year. Also important to know about the community college in Oregon, we have what's called the Oregon Promise Grant, where our state wanted to encourage more students to go to community college. And if a student has a 2.5 GPA or above, they are eligible for the Oregon Promise Grant, which tries to cover the majority of community college tuition for most Oregon students. So it's really a great program for a lot of our kids. And we saw a big shift a number of years ago. I think it was 4 or 5 years ago when the Oregon Promise came into existence, where we had a lot of students who say there were 3.5 students, good students. Parents didn't qualify financially for federal financial aid, for the Pell Grant, for state federal aid. So a school like SOU or U of O or OSU was going to cost these families $25,000 to $28,000 a year. That's a chunk of money. Those students got $3,500 a year from the Oregon Promise Grant, which covered a big chunk of their community college tuition. So then parents really only, and students had to come up then with housing costs for community college, or not even having to come up with housing costs if the students remained at home. So we saw a lot of students then go to Central Oregon Community College that has dorms, which is a great campus. If you've never been up to their campus in Bend and your students interested in community college, you definitely want to check out COCC in Bend. Southwestern Oregon Community College in Coos Bay also has dorms. We send a lot of students to Portland Community College up in Portland. And if your student is interested in looking at these pathways, we're going to have a information session in May that just focuses on community college pathways and that process. So keep an eye out for that one too. Oh, this is me too. Okay, I'll be fast. We have a lot of students who are interested in careers where training is offered by private vocational schools. So examples are culinary, becoming a tattoo artist, massage therapist, mechanics, cosmetology, dental hygienist. Great programs at a lot of schools. Our community colleges also offer a lot of these programs now. So I really encourage students to look at the different pathways, compare the costs of the programs. Will their federal or state aid cover the programs at the private for-profit school versus the community college? Again, research really comes into play. Talk to professionals in the field. How did they get to where they got? Also apprenticeship opportunities and Job Corps, which is another great program, federal program for students who qualify, where you go and live on a Job Corps campus, you get the training, it's free, you take college classes if it's a career pathway that is affiliated with college classes. So lots of options and lots of scholarships actually. A lot of our organizations really love to support students who are pursuing vocational careers. So we've got lots of information on this for students and parents. Okay.
Okay, I'm going to talk really quickly about the Oregon Public Universities. I don't know if you're all aware, but there's 7 here in our state of Oregon. I really want to encourage you all to look through the college handbook that Jen has worked on and reworked on and reworked on year after year. It is an incredibly dense, rich source of information, and it takes a while to take in. So kind of one of the ways to approach it, and the reason we wanted to break this down and we're kind of highlighting these pages is to kind of, again, when you have a question, go to that college handbook and look it up and kind of, read thoroughly through a page or two and then let it go and move on. So with the Oregon Public Universities, most of them, the GPA requirement is 3.0. Okay, so we really encourage our students to be aware of that and work toward a little bit above that so that they've got some wiggle room, so that they have access. There are a few situations where a student maybe with a little bit lower than a 3.0 and maybe some extenuating circumstances can go ahead and get admission. And a lot of times counselors will come in and write a letter of support and that kind of thing for them. In addition, they need to have a C- or better in their core classes. And their core classes are classes like their math, their science, their English, their social studies, those core kind of grad requirements. So we kind of always say D is for diploma, but C is for college. We really obviously want a little higher than a C, but students do need to realize that if they got a D plus in an algebra class, we kind of want to repeat that and make that kind of bring that up to a C or higher. At our public universities, the ACT, SAT are not required at this point. That's been a big move over the last year, even that was actually taking place even before COVID shut most of that down. However, some of the schools do still reference and consider these scores for their scholarships or their honors colleges or programs. So it's good to look at that. And again, sometimes all the schools give a certain amount of merit aid, and that's regardless of your financial situation, depending on a student's GPA and maybe the SAT or ACT score. So that can make a big financial difference. So it is part of putting that puzzle together to make a school affordable, to kind of work for that merit scholarship if possible. So it's good for parents and students to know what those criteria are. Majors and minors vary by school. Those are all on page 30. Obviously, the bigger schools like OSU and U of O are going to have a lot of majors and minors, like pretty much anything you could think of. Whereas the smaller schools like SOU or obviously OIT is a little bit different, or Eastern are going to have fewer. Most have honors colleges or honors programs. The advantages of that, so an honors college or honors program, you have to meet a GPA criteria, sometimes write an additional essay or essays, that kind of thing. Typically what that means is as freshmen, students have access to honors dorms, which yes, are a little bit nicer. They also typically get first choice at class selection. So that means that when they're looking at those general ed requirements or even some of those higher level classes, they're just having an easier time accessing them. They may have more access to internships or research project kind of positions, that kind of thing. Some of those honors programs are also going to have a few additional requirements in terms of earning a degree. So it's important to kind of have your student look into what that is. But remember, honors programs were developed in these big state universities to attract and pull in some of our really talented, high performing students and kind of, mimic what some of these smaller private schools do. They're kind of creating a smaller school within the bigger school, but at a state university cost. So they really are worth, looking into if your student is a very high achieving student. The important thing here too is to remember deadlines, and that has to do with any school, but we'll go over that a little bit more. Most deadlines for the public universities are the beginning of January in a normal year. You can apply earlier, all the way into November for some of them too. Some of that's not as relevant, but some of it is. Okay. Okay, someone brought up WUI schools, that strange little acronym, Western Undergraduate Exchange. I think this is just, kind of a wonderful, this exchange, this collaboration is with all these other states provides a wonderful opportunity for our students to go to school out of state and experience a different region, a different culture, a different kind of diversity without the private school tuition. So, we've got just a tiny handful listed. There are, gosh, I don't know how many there are, close to maybe Jen, I don't even know if you know off the top of your head how many WUIs there are. There are so many, some, again, more esteemed than others. We listed some that our students really like to go to because I think they present, as you might imagine, just kind of a different feel from this Southern Oregon area, Northern Arizona. About 16,000 kids, lots of majors right at the base of a mountain range, high desert, beautiful weather, 300 days of sunshine. They can ski, they can mountain bike, all sorts of things. Hawaii, no, you don't even really need to say anything more there. Montana State, we get quite a few kids go there. Chico, Western Washington, lots more. Humboldt, Sonoma, goes on and on. Each school has different requirements. That means if you're coming from out of state, you don't just apply and just get in. If you have to kind of meet their criteria, they want to admit students who they feel are going to really, contribute to their community. The important thing about WUI, and I think I missed that, is that reduced tuition. So unlike other out-of-state tuitions, WUI schools will charge you almost the same tuition as in-state tuition. Typically, it's about 1.25 of their own in-state tuition. So depending on what their in-state tuition is, it could be pretty much the same as our state schools, sometimes even less, maybe a little bit more, but it's a really nice way, again, to go to a school in a different state for a very similar cost as our own schools here. Okay, now we just like to kind of touch down on our good neighbor, California, and talk a little bit about both the UC, the University of California system, and the state system. And they are a little bit different. So we provided two maps there. One there on the left is all the schools that are UC schools. On the right, all of the state California schools. And the reason we want to bring this up is because a lot of our students feel like, oh, I want to go to California, and I've heard great things about, UC Santa Barbara, UC Davis, whatever, which there are many wonderful, wonderful things about these schools. We need you all to know that as residents of the state of Oregon, your students do not pay in-state tuition at the University of California system, okay? You pay out of state, and there are no scholarships for outer state. There really aren't, because we're not tax-paying citizens of those states, okay? So those scholarships are intended for Californians. So when you're considering a UC school, you're really looking at a private school price tag, but without those merit aid packages. So we really are looking at typically, not always, but typically really full pay. And that means that right now they're running about $70,000 when you look at tuition, room and board. And you really do want room and board, because most of those UC schools, finding housing is very, very difficult. So that's important to know about, if that's a dream for your student, that you're very realistic about the finances. There is one UC school that is a WUI school, and that's UC Merced. It's the newest UC school, and they're trying to kind of, again, as you might imagine, build enrollment. So as a WUI school, you can get into that school for a much lower cost. State schools, on the other hand, are much more accessible. Am I still there?
Mhm.
Okay, I'm sorry, I just lost mine. Okay, state schools are much, and quite a few of the state schools are WUI schools. So that's something you can kind of check into. And let's see if there's anything else to say. Oh, the visual and performing arts requirement, really important, a little more relaxed than it used to be. But what it means is that to apply to either a state school or in California, or a UC school, your student needs a sequence of a 1 and a 2 of a visual or performing arts. So that means it could be Art 1 or Art 2, or it could be, orchestra for, 2 semesters, or it could be, there's kind of a big list of possible ways to fulfill that sequence. Digital Media 1, Digital Media 2. If your student is considering that, they can contact their counselor and we can make sure that they've got that scheduled into their sequence over the years. It doesn't have to be one semester after another, like in the same exact year, but they do have to address a, number one of a class, and a number two. Okay.
I just wanted to check before we jump into the private colleges. I saw there was something put in the chat. Is there a question that we might want to address?
Yeah, let's take a look. Does the handbook discuss out of country options?
Oh, no, it does not. I'm going to build that section maybe. We do have students who have been going out of country, mostly to the UK. I have more students this year exploring other countries in Europe. I have some knowledge about that, but not much, but I'm totally willing to help students research. So no, there is not a section in the handbook about that, but maybe we'll work on that. Okay, Maurice.
All right, good to go. All right, private colleges and universities. So it's kind of a dilemma for some people. And sometimes some people feel it's out of reach and not even something to discuss or having conversation, but there's a lot of benefits considering private colleges versus public ones. I know from personal experience, I'll get into that a little bit better later on, a little more, I mean. So basically, if you want to look at the numbers, like Diane said, maybe the cost of a college is about $70,000 California. You're looking at a private college, maybe let's just make it easy, about the same cost. The benefit of a private college is that there's more monies to offer students. And when you look at the numbers, most students are in some form of financial aid at a private university. So when you compare the two, so public school in California, private school in California, both $70,000. It doesn't matter if you're in state or out of state. The cost is the same for a private university, okay? For a public university, you're gonna pay more, once again, if you're an out-of-state student. So once again, let's look at a student from Oregon looking at maybe a school back east, just on the other side of the nation. They're gonna pay out-of-state tuition, which could be 2 or 3 times the cost of a in-state student. Looking at a private university, let's once again make it 70,000. It's gonna cost less typically to go to a private university. Once again, based on merit needs, financial needs. My son personally, we looked at different universities and he was interested in aviation. So we narrowed it down his junior year to 3 universities, one in Arizona, Embry-Riddle, one in Salt Lake City, Westminster, and one in Logan, Utah. And so basically it went from Embry-Riddle to being the most expensive, Westminster, which was the private university, mid-range cost, Logan Public University, low cost, but still paying out-of-state tuition that first year. When we ran the numbers and looked at the financial aid package that were being offered, it was way cheaper to go to the private university in Salt Lake City, Westminster. That's what he attended. And just to kind of clarify the cost, he's debt-free. There's no debt, there's no student loan. He came out clean. So there is benefits considering private universities versus a public one. Once again, more money is offered to students. It doesn't matter if you're out of state or in state. They are actively seeking diversity and different students from different regions of the US. So there's good rates of admissions as well. So it's really something to think about versus negating because of some of the mythology that's out there about private universities. So once again, you want to check the requirements for admissions, typically require letters of recommendation. You want to kind of plan that as a student, get to know your teachers, start planning which ones you want to write a letter of recommendation for you. About 2 to 3 letters, typically 1 from a counselor, 1 to 2 from a teacher. Require an essay, personal essay. Yes, my son had to write one. Also to apply as a backup to an Oregon Public University if you don't get into a private one. So.
Okay. I thought this was you, Maurice.
Is that me still? Oh, okay.
Yes, I
All
think you
right.
are doing the application process.
I am. So yeah, as a parent, I mean, this whole process can be a little overwhelming sometimes. So biggest word of advice is get organized. Start sophomore year, start talking about it. Junior year, you want to narrow down some of the possibilities, and just kind of take that step-by-step process. Review admission requirements, make sure your student can be admitted based on requirements of the particular university or college. Transcripts requests on page 14 of the handbook. You're going to want to get the registrar to send the universities the transcripts and fill out the requirements. As far as like Common App, it's my first year using it since I came here to Ashland High School, and I have to say it's pretty amazing. It's exactly what the title says. It's a common application. The student fills out one time all the information. The counselor fills out the information as a school report, letter of recommendation, uploads it, and the student can basically link it to the different universities they want to apply to. So it's super easy, user-friendly. I personally like it. That's something that, Jen, do they do in CCR?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And we're going to do an information session in May too on applying to four-year universities, where we'll go more into the Common App and how that works and the process.
Okay, same thing I said before about letters of recommendation. Start to, getting to know their teachers, seeing which ones they want to consider having them write a letter of recommendation for that college application. Activity chart. More universities are looking at a holistic approach now. They want to see what students do outside of the classroom, volunteer work. How do they spend their time outside of the classroom? It's not all about numbers and academics anymore. So they want a whole student. It's proven that they tend to be more successful if they've done things outside of the classroom versus inside only. So have your student start tracking what they do as far as even the job or volunteering, each year. So keep track of that, use that in the application. It'll benefit them later on. Personal statements and essay, they want to kind of start working on that because a lot of universities do require that from students, write personal essay. Early decision and early action, know the difference. A lot of times you're locking yourself into a particular college if you take early decision, okay? So it's kind of a contract saying that this is the school you're going to go to and you're not going to accept admissions from other universities offering it once you decide on an early decision. And so Jen can talk about that a little more too as well.
Yeah, and we could talk more about that at the four-year college night, because we've got about 10 more minutes because we'll try to end around 6:30. But we can talk to the pros and cons of early decision and early action at the May evening too. And I'm also willing to talk about it anytime anyone wants to contact me. Okay, so this last part is just a brief overview of financial aid and where to find information about that in the handbook, and also scholarships. So when students or parents think about financial aid, they usually think grants. At least parents do. They know grants, the free money that you can get, scholarships, free money. They usually don't think loans. So when you hear college say that 98% of their students get financial aid, that doesn't mean that 98% of those students are getting grants and scholarships, the free money. 50% might be getting grants and scholarships. The other 48% might be taking out loans. So it's really important to start to think of financial aid as including loans. We talk a lot about this in CCR. And just to give you a heads up, we really encourage students to look at going to college in a way that's really financially responsible and feasible for themselves and their families. So students now can't take out more than $5,500 in personal loans their first year of college. That's it. That's all the federal government allows them to take out. It's a reasonable amount. A lot of parents have been getting it a lot this year. Well, can't my student take out more loans? Like, how are we supposed to make up this $13,000 of estimated need? It's like, no, students can't do that. Parents say, well, when I was in college, I could just take out that many loans. It's like, yeah, that's why we have so many teachers and people in their 40s and 50s who are $100,000 in debt still with student loans. The federal government has tried to stop that. So A lot of our students can, if they choose a college that really is a good fit for them financially, for their family, they can go to college, especially freshman year, start off relatively debt-free. And so I really encourage students to look at that. Parents and students can decide that, hey, this is your dream school. We want to make it work for you. We as parents are going to take out a loan, or we're going to not take any vacations for the next 4 years or whatever. Those are personal family decisions, but those are the things you need to be thinking about. So all financial aid centers around the FAFSA. So if that's an acronym you're not familiar with yet, you will be when your student is in senior year. So the FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. It goes live October 1st. So if you are a junior parent, you cannot start working on the FAFSA until October of senior year. And so this year's juniors next fall will be filling out the 2022-23 FAFSA. And families get confused on this because there's 2 FAFSAs available when they go to fill out the FAFSA, and they will be filling out the FAFSA for the year they will be starting college. So I like to get that out early and fast for those parents who are like gung-ho and kids who October 1st are going to just jump on and do it. You don't want to do the wrong application. So the FAFSA application, as you're probably getting now, is done completely online. It's much simpler than it used to be. Students and parents each, one parent, if the student is in a 2-parent household, each get an FSA ID, which is like their electronic signature. I'm going to say this again. I like to say it often. An early student own FSA ID. It's like your PIN for your ATM card. Parents should get their own FSA ID. It's how you sign your FAFSA. It's how, if you do decide to take out a loan from the federal government, you will sign with your FSA ID. So it's something that should be pretty secure. So the Pell Grant is what the FAFSA qualifies students for besides institutional aid and state aid. This year, the Pell Grant, the maximum amount is $6,395. So that's for a year. So our students who have very low income, who have what is called as EFC, is the expected family contribution, which is the number that the FAFSA spits out, they receive that full Pell Grant to go to college for their freshman year. Oregon has a number of grants that are also based on the FAFSA. We have the Oregon Opportunity Grant and the Oregon Promise Grant. There's information about that in the handbook. So students who are low income can also get the Oregon Opportunity Grant, which then for a 4-year university is another $3,600. It goes up a little each year. And then the Oregon Promise Grant is for students going to community college, where that can range from $1,000 to, last year it was $3,750. So lots of potential money in grants for students based on the FAFSA. The CSS profile is another financial aid application that a lot of private schools use in addition to the FAFSA. It asks for a lot more information, and I'm not going to go into the details of what FAFSA asks about. It collects both financial information from the family, they want to know about your assets, and they want to know about family demographics. The CSS profile asks for a lot more information. So if you want to learn more about this, you can research it, but you can also come to the financial aid evening in April. So after grants, scholarships are the biggest part of financial aid that students and parents are interested in learning about. So we have a scholarship section in the handbook that kind of goes over the 2 main pathways that our students use for applying for scholarships, which is the OSAC scholarship application. OSAC is the Oregon Office of Student Access and Completion, which if you haven't had a student as a senior go on to college at Ashland High School, you'll become familiar with OSAC next year when your student is a senior. And then we also have what we call the local scholarship application process. And so this is it right now. We are in the heat of scholarship season for seniors. Scholarships are started being due February 15th. We've got big deadlines February 22nd. And the final deadline for OSAC is March 1st. So if you're trying to get in touch with me this week, I'm going to mainly be meeting with students and parents working on scholarship applications and FAFSA. So if it takes me a little bit of time to set up an appointment with you, that is why. But important to realize the best chance of receiving a scholarship is from the school that admits you. So like Maurice said, these private schools, right off the top, most of them will give you some kind of merit aid. So a presidential scholarship, a dean's scholarship. So there's $20,000. You get into Lewis and Clark, you get the presidential scholarship. It's $25,000 a year for 4 years. So they're bringing their price down to make it closer to a state school. A lot of the really competitive schools do not give any kind of merit aid. So like the Ivy League schools, Stanford. What they do give though is a lot of need-based aid. So these schools like to refer to themselves as no loan schools. So if your student can get into a school like Harvard or Cornell or Princeton or Stanford, these schools, or Case Western, there's a lot of no loan schools that are not those name schools that everyone knows. And I have lists of no loan schools. And if you want me to email it to you, just email me and I will send that to you, because our students go for the big name competitive schools that are no loan, but they leave out schools like Case Western or a lot of the Midwestern schools that are really amazing schools that have given our students amazing financial aid packages. So, and that's because they have these huge endowments. So I think I covered everything I needed to cover on this page. And I've also covered a lot of this information. So in the handbook, we have what are called cheat sheets in there that we give to our seniors for both the OSAC and the local scholarships to give them an idea of what scholarships they may be eligible for. And this is a great thing to look through when you're a junior or before senior year to start to get a sense of what scholarships there are. There's scholarships based on merit. Like, are you a good student? You have a high GPA. They're based on your career pathway. Are you interested in going into nursing or something in the STEM field, engineering? Are you interested in a vocational pathway, like going into becoming an electrician or a mechanic or a cosmetologist? Those are some of our biggest scholarships, are for students pursuing vocational pathways. So seniors get a lot of information about this. It's one of the things we spend a lot of time on in their CCR class, is actually working on their personal statements that all these scholarship applications use. And I think now we just have our little final teaser for you all of upcoming info sessions. Maurice is gonna kind of highlight them. And if maybe you wanna take a quick snap of that and or check out the counseling department news that we sent you, which also has this information in it.
Yeah, if you want to, you can just take your phone and take a shot of that, a pic of that. Probably be the easiest thing to do, or jot down the dates. Score info session night, Wednesday, February 24th. Find a college pathway that is a good fit, March 10th. Financial Aid 101, April 14th. Community College Pathway and Application Process info session is going to be May 12th. 4-year College Pathways and Application Process info session is May 26th. College visits and virtual college fairs. It's going to be a variety of times. So just keep in mind, as a parent as well, these things come up fast, especially when you start high school. I think elementary was really slow for me, and then middle school was kind of just traumatic. You know, he's not a little kid anymore. And then high school, before I knew it, he was gone for college. So just keep that in mind. Time travels fast when you hit high school. So, okay, anything else, ladies? Diane, Jennifer?
No, I think I'm going to stop the recording, and then I know I am willing to hang